From an economic perspective, I look at Bitcoin and think Bitcoin is the first perfect money. It's what I call the triple point of money. And the triple point is a concept whereby an element can be in 3 states at the one time. So under certain atmospheric temperatures and pressures, you can have water, H2O, in the state of a gas in the form of steam. You can have it in the form of ice, a solid, and you can have it in the form of a liquid at a certain temperature, at a certain pressure. And this is very unique. And when you see it, and I urge you to Google it, you look at a YouTube video and just Google triple point water, and you'll see in a single beaker, you'll see ice, you'll see steam, and then you'll see water, all coexisting at a relatively low temperature. It's really bizarre. And it's because the effect of pressure on that beaker basically allows water to exist in all 3 states, or H2O to exist in all 3 phases at the one time. And I look at this and think, well, how does that apply to Bitcoin? And I look at Bitcoin and think there are 3 functions of money with Bitcoin. There is store of value, mean of exchange, and unit of account. And I look at those are the 3 phases of Bitcoin, much like water, ice, and steam. And for the first time in history, Bitcoin allows money, or the function of money, to exist in all 3 states at the one time. And if I just break that down, there are some technical innovations that allow Bitcoin to exist in those 3 phases at the one time. So you've got the function of store of value. That was typically in historical context was held by gold for thousands of years. And that was held by gold because it basically had the lowest inflation rate out of any of the other metals that we could use. It was durable, it was portable, it was recognizable. You could basically use that anywhere in the world. It was the same. So it was fungible as well. And I look at this and think, well, that was really good. But Bitcoin is better than that because it has absolute digital scarcity. So those 3 words, absolute digital scarcity, those 3 words were an oxymoron before Bitcoin was invented. It was not possible to have digital scarcity before Bitcoin was invented. And now we do. And the other thing is, we were never able to have absolute scarcity before Bitcoin was invented. And now we do. So I look at this and think, when you compare the 2% inflation rate of gold to the 0% inflation rate of Bitcoin, Bitcoin becomes exponentially better. And coupled with that, it's digital, so it's transportable all over the world, anywhere with an internet connection. All of a sudden, there's a huge, huge exponential upgrade in that store of value function of money. And a lot of people don't really understand what that means. But to put this into context, a 2% inflation rate in gold means that we're producing more gold in 1 year than existed in the year 1850. So if we look at that, in 170 years, we're now producing this financial year, in the year 2025, we're producing in this year alone more gold than existed in the entirety of history. That's insane. That's what a 2% inflation rate. And to your point earlier about Muhammad Al-Arian and Joe Kernan giving Muhammad shit about the 2% inflation rate, that's what a 2% inflation rate does over 170 years. And what I'm telling you is Bitcoin is exponentially better because it doesn't matter if we go 100 years or 1,000 years or 10,000 years. There's only going to be 21 million. And so that represents an exponential upgrade on the store of value function for what we've got. The second is a mean of exchange, and I'll just gloss over this because it's probably the least important out of any of the functions of money. But you've got a $100 trillion market cap in the USD, global reserve currency. And people all over the world want to use the US dollar. They're not able to action or get access to that. But guess what? Anyone with an internet connection can access Bitcoin. To me, the technological upgrade on the function of money for mean of exchange with Bitcoin over the US dollar is that it's censorship resistant and it's seizure resistant. Now, I bet Russia wishes they understood what Bitcoin was 2 or 3 years ago when the SWIFT system, the US government, basically took their foreign reserves. They took $500 billion in foreign reserves from them. If they had have held that in Bitcoin, there was no way they could have recovered or stolen that $500 billion in foreign reserves from them. So I look at that and think censorship resistant and seizure resistant is a huge upgrade. Now, the most important part of a function of money is being a unit of account. And this is the most boring part to talk of, so I'll try and make it interesting. But we haven't had an accounting upgrade in the last 600 years. So the last accounting upgrade that we had, which basically accounts for everything, was the double entry ledger system that was basically the Phoenicians in the Golden Age. That led to a boom in global trade, circa, late 1400s, basically totally redefined global trade. The Medicis became basically bankers to the world. It led to an explosion in wealth across the world. Fast forward 600 years, we now see an accounting upgrade in that we no longer need a double entry ledger system. We now have a triple entry ledger system in the form of a ledger that everyone can see, verify, and it's an immutable ledger that cannot be changed. This is a huge upgrade to the existing financial system that we've got. And I just trying to put it in terms of why is this important? If you play a game, the only thing that you need to assure yourself of to make sure that you win that game is you just need to control the pen. If you control the pen, you win. And this is why they say the pen is mightier than the sword. Whoever gets to write down the score can tell who wins. And it sounds so plain and simple, but this is the power of Bitcoin, is that no one has control of that pen. It's an immutable ledger that everyone can see and everyone can verify themselves. And so this is why Michael Saylor is, absolutely pathological about trying to control as many Bitcoin as he can, because he understands that this is like the Chinese game of Go, where he is trying to cede territory on a finite amount of space. So if we look at it as a chessboard, he's trying to control as much of that chessboard as possible to control that outcome that he has. And he knows that everyone is going to need to use this as an accounting system moving forward. And so if you control the pen, or if you control most of the pen, the board, whatever you want to call it, then you're going to be able to garner better outcomes than anyone else. And this is where the whole world is going to move to that accounting system rather than the double entry ledger system that we've got. The world just doesn't know it yet. And this is where I look at this and I think, well, that's interesting. Well, the double entry ledger system, the unit of account, basically accounts for about $900 trillion of value in the world right now. Mean of exchange accounts for roughly $100 trillion. And store of value, the gold market, roughly accounts for between $15 and $20 trillion, depending on what you want to look at. And what's really unique about Bitcoin across these three things is that unit of account was dominated by a double entry ledger system. Mean of exchange was dominated by the US dollar, and the store of value function was dominated by gold. We have never in our history had one asset that dominates all three classes or functions of money. This is the unique thing about Bitcoin, where I look at this and go, isn't that interesting? Now, the interesting thing, and where people, I think, from an economic perspective, don't really account for the potential of Bitcoin the way it should be accounted for, is people look at this and think, okay, well, you've got $20 trillion of gold, $100 trillion of USD, and you've got, I like to say, $2,000 trillion of value that needs to be accounted for. So call it $2.1 quadrillion. And if you divide that by 21 million, then you get to $100 million a coin. Personally, that's not how economics works from my understanding. And this is where I don't want to get into trouble from people going, there's no way you can come up with these numbers. It's not realistic. It's like, look, you come up with a better way of figuring it out, but this is what I've come up with. And this is why I'm far more concerned about the methodology and understanding the methodology before we look at the number, because the number doesn't make any sense. But in my world, economics works by when you create competition for an asset, it's not a matter of simply adding those values together. It becomes a multiplication of those values because you have a competitive tension vying for each of those things. So where this is unique in history is that we have never had store of value competing for unit of account, competing for mean of exchange. This is the first time in history that those three functions of money have had to compete for the grace of one asset. Prior to this, each function of money had its apex predator in that function. Now we've got one asset which has to basically fill across those three functions. And my conjecture is that, like going to a house auction when no one's bidding, you're going to get a much lower price. But when you've got three bidders in the room bidding hard on that property, because that is the best asset for each of those functions, you're going to have an exponentially better return. So it's more like, you need to multiply store of value by meat of exchange by unit of account to get the addressable market cap in the future. And that's a number I don't really want to discuss because I don't even know what the number is, but it's a lot bigger than we can think of.
I would love for you to kind of elaborate people's life. Like, what does it actually mean for the average person? All this, what you just explained is amazing. And it's the first time I've heard you explain that. But what does it mean for the average guy?
If you want the answer to that question right there and you like that spicy clip, check it out here. Come on, we'll see you in there. But if you want the full interview in its entirety, all the spicy clips put together, and you're not going to want to miss it, believe me, then check that out here. Come on, we'll see you in there. Do it.